Hello, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. So thank you for coming back to my channel. Anyway, a Russian general just yesterday confirmed what I've been saying since the beginning of this war, and that is that if Ukraine is crushed by Russia, then Ukraine shall not be Russia's final victim. Putin and his bloodthirsty acolytes are licking their lips for fresh conquests. They would like to oppress Moldova and Georgia even more than they already are, to swallow them whole, to attack Poland, to aggress Finland, anywhere that was formerly part of the Russian Empire, and maybe go further, former Soviet satellite states like Slovakia, the Czech Republic, wherever else. So really, he is a megalomaniac. There is no end to his bloodlust. He's a man of really just limitless aggression. So it's a hyper-aggressive regime here. And this was actually on Piervam, which is the main channel in Russia, and said that Ukraine is only a springboard. And this was from no mean source. Lieutenant General Andrei Mordvichev, I hope I pronounced that correctly. And there's some who say he was actually promoted to Colonel General by President Putin not long ago. So this was recorded in July, but only broadcast recently because he was being promoted. And he said that the president wants to carry on this action for some time and expand it later on. And this is a direct quotation. The war will last over a longer period. It makes no sense to discuss specific timelines. When it comes to Eastern Europe and the upcoming tasks, this will certainly require more time. And the interview inquires, is Ukraine just a springboard? To which Mordvichev says, yes, you are correct. This is just the beginning. I believe the proponents of war will not stop there. So they want to take in more countries. Any country that was ever conquered by Russia, they should try and claim it back. The unacceptance of Ukrainian independence. It's clear. A Russian was saying to me just today that, well, we just don't accept that Ukraine is a separate country, has no right to exist, is not a legitimate state, and so on. And they've, ultra-nationalist Russian politicians are actually quite mainstream. The late and unlamented Vladimir Zhirinovsky, he said so about Kazakhstan, where he was born, and anywhere, any former Soviet country. Some of them talked about retaking Alaska, and on and on. So they are hyper-aggressive, coming up with these baseless accusations that the United Kingdom has trained Ukrainian troops to try and destroy a Russian nuclear power station, but the attack was thwarted, as in this to provide a pretext then for Russia to launch some unprovoked attack on the United Kingdom, and so on. A bit like the nonsense they were coming about Zaporizhia. Oh, the Ukrainians want to blow it up. No, Russia might blow it up and they try and blame the Ukrainians, just like they used to gas all those Syrian civilians to death and blame the Syrian insurgents, or all these things. The Ukrainians are deliberately doing it to themselves. Yeah, that's right. I mean, Litvinenko probably poisoned himself. It was probably suicide. Yeah, Prigozhin probably crashed his own plane, kind of thing, and on and on. And this underscores why it's so vital to save Ukraine, because if Ukrainian freedom falls, that will simply whet Putin's appetites for more victims, and he'll be buoyed up by that. Obviously, the Chinese think they can retake Taiwan, and okay, they've got a strong case to Taiwan because most of the world recognizes it as Chinese sovereign territory. Where virtually, well, almost nobody, no other sovereign state recognizes Ukraine as part of Russia. And it is true that some of Russia's satrapies, like Syria, they do recognize Lugansk and Donetsk as part of Russia, but the international community, by and large, overwhelmingly doesn't recognize those as Russian. They regard them as legally Ukrainian, which indeed they are. So that's why it's so important that Ukraine should win, because that's the only thing that will spell finis to Putin's aggression. Remember, Russia's been illegally occupying Transnistria, which is part of the Republic of Moldova since 1991, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which are part of Georgia since 1991. And obviously, they've murdered foreign civilians abroad. And Alexander Litvinenko, for example, that poor woman who was killed in Salisbury when they attempted to murder Sergei Skripal, and other people, a Russian businessman, Georgian businessman in the United Kingdom, died in very mysterious circumstances. And no, I'm not certain that it was Putin's acolytes who murdered them, or, Russian dissidents, especially the ethnically Chechen, murdered in Turkey and Germany, and on and on and on. And it's fascinating the way the only politician, American politician, Putin will ever speak up for is Trump. I wonder why, because he obviously recognizes Trump's coming back is good for him, because he thinks that Trump will betray the Ukrainians and the Ukraine will fall. So the Russian hacking thing, I mean, it couldn't be clearer. It's yet more probative evidence that, yes, he desperately wants Trump back, because Trump is his agent in the White House, is going to do his bidding, will reduce, if not cut off, Ukrainian arms supplies altogether. I know Congress has the power of the purse. They can vote the money, but ultimately, Trump's going to decide whether the weapons are dispatched or not if he comes back into the White House. Fortunately, that doesn't look likely. How else do you explain this? Reminds me of what Lord Halifax said when Rudolf Hess flew to the United Kingdom. Not Lord Halifax, and the Duke of Hamilton said when Rudolf Hess flew to the UK in the Second World War, wanted to meet him. If you're walking down the street and a notorious prostitute comes and gives you a big hug, how do you explain that to your wife? That doesn't look good. Okay, so if Trump endorses you as an American, if Putin, same person, if Putin gives you his imprimatur as an American presidential candidate, what's the innocent explanation for that? I mean, there isn't one. Someone who's known to be extremely hostile to the United States, obviously been caught on many aggressive spying missions, is very much against NATO, has attacked American allies abroad, has carried out numerous atrocities in Syria, Ukraine, and elsewhere. There can be no innocent explanation for that. But anyway, it's good to see Putin humiliated, but sadly, I think he'll get something from the North Koreans, and shows how feeble he is. He has to turn to one of the most economically underdeveloped countries in the world for armaments, because the Ukrainians are destroying his weaponry at such a rate. But it looks like the Ukrainians are through the first line of defense, should be much easier second and third, because they made the first one so tough with so many mines. They're not that much left for the second and third, which is not to say the Ukrainians will necessarily get through them by November, get to the Sea of Azov by the end of this year. In fact, I don't think they'll do so, but they will get part way through the second. It'll be rather easier. But will the Russians be able to build up the second and third one again by next spring? Probably. So this war is not going to end anytime soon, I am afraid. And Putin was given the most fantastic figures, saying that 72,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed since June alone, which is ridiculous. But the United States estimates that's the death toll for them for the whole 19 months of the war, not the last 3 months. Or 270,000 people have volunteered for the Russian military since in the last 6 months, said Putin. Now, I think if the people who are drafted as well as volunteered, that might be about right. But to say that many have volunteered, that is rather far-fetched. So you can't believe a word he says. You wouldn't trust him as far as you could punch him, although that is actually quite far, how far you could punch him. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, because I'm always looking for donations to keep the channel going. Right, thank you for watching, and remember, I help people with elocution lessons and essays, theses, dissertations, and so on, and tour guiding in London town. All right, goodbye, respected viewers. Toodle pip.